the message this morning. It's very simple. The very simple message is the lives of children matter to Jesus. And that's not even controversial. That we go, duh, come on, man. We understand this. It only gets complicated and emotion-filled and divisive when we say, well, that means children of all ages, at all stages of development. Ones that are old children like me and you. Ones that are little ones like Serena's here, and even those that are unborn. That's when it gets kind of crazy and divisive. Since 1973, every year in January, there's this huge march in December, and in Washington, D.C., it commemorates what the Supreme Court decision. And lately, we've had even counter-protests so that you have two competing views, and they're talking about two different things. And it's just so divisive. Yet, we've been called to engage in our world. About each thing, God has something to say about everything that goes on in our world. And even things that children before they're born and after, our God has something to say. And that's where we want to wade in. And I'm wading in the deep water here this morning. But I ask for a couple things here. I ask that we might lead with love and respect for each other. Because we know the person next to you, and they might not think the same way that you do. But that we might still have some respect and care for them. I want us to remember that God changes minds and hearts. It's not my role up here this morning to say, oh, my goal is to change your mind. That's not what I'm hoping to do. I'm just going to talk about a tough subject. And hopefully you hear what God has to say through. And I want to hopefully get down to that we talk about the same things this morning. Not just talking past each other or over each other or talking down to a person. Just, can we talk about the same things and hear what God has to say about them? That's where I want to go. And I know that's a long trigger warning for a lot of people. Like, oh man, I'm going to hear something crazy. But I needed to start off that way so that we get the right mindset as we go forward. And because we're going to talk about different values. And it's okay. We can talk about it, and we can be honest about it, and we can be fair about it. But Americans have this value of autonomy. That wait a minute, this is my life. Nobody goes through life thinking, well, I want somebody else to plan out my life. I want somebody else to run my life. We have this autonomy. It's my life. It's my body. And then that's a universal desire for us all. And that's normal. Especially, and I have to say this part, I recognize my own maleness here. Historically speaking, women have had their rights trampled. It's a historical idea. Ever since ancient times, women were property. Or maybe they were wombs with legs. That's just how it was. And sometimes it was because women died sooner, or they died in childbirth, so they weren't around as long. Whatever it was, historically speaking, that's how it has gone. And when Moses came with the law on Mount Sinai and gave it to God's people, the law elevated the rights of women above those in the other cultures. In other cultures, you were just a property. You were something to be used and abused and just thrown away if desired. But the Bible lifted women and said, wait a minute. You can't just discard people like that. You need to it's not coveting your neighbor's wife and all that. They're not property. And that's how we get into this idea that when people are just property, that drives us crazy. Why would we do that? Jesus lifted women up. They flocked to him because he said, you're worthwhile. You are not property. Societies drop exponentially when people are not equal. They're not looked at as respectful. They're not given the dignity that God gives each of us. You know, the early church was maligned for this reason. Oh, it's just a grouping of all women and old men and orphans, losers. You know, it was that way because these women and the old people and these orphans, they would flock to Jesus because he lifted them up and says, you're worthwhile. Your rights are as everyone else's. You matter to God. That was the early church. You know, the trouble came when people took Christianity and twisted it and said, oh, I can use this to keep other people down. And that's not how Jesus started off. It's not how his words for people. You matter. You as a person, you matter. And oftentimes it's this inequality that drives people to take some steps that they normally wouldn't. You know, I thought of this the other day. Why would somebody look to have an abortion? And all of us are thinking, oh yeah, it's this reason. But there's so many different reasons. Oftentimes it's the person who thinks, I don't have any good choices here. This choice is the best choice of a whole bunch of bad ones. And that's the thinking process and the choices that they make. You know, I stand up here as someone who has never had to make that choice. It's the inequality even in our age today that guys get the privilege of creating babies and then we can walk away and say, no, it's all on you. You need to take care of this girl. And then you're stuck. A girl can't just walk away from that. And she gets into this and say, wait a minute, I'm not even with this guy anymore. It was a mistake at the time. I want to just get rid of this situation. Or sometimes she thinks, I have dreams in life and this just derailed all of them. Or she thinks, my family would never understand. They would ostracize me. And we would think, wait a minute, this is the 21st century. This would never happen, yet it does. Or we think financially, I can't even take care of this child I have right now. How can I go forward? And we often think, well, of course, this should be an easy thing to wade through. And then when they're in this situation, sometimes they think this is my best choice of a whole bunch of bad choices. And we shouldn't dismiss that. We might disagree, but we cannot dismiss that and say, well, you're silly for this. Because those are accurate descriptions of what's going on. Sooner or later, we get down to what's the deal here? What's the bottom line? And it becomes one of the two. It's a rights issue. Wait a minute, this is my body. I need to make these choices, and it's my rights. I can do this, or it's a morality issue. That, wait a minute, this can't be right. And before we dismiss the two, that they have nothing to do with each other, they always intersect. And usually it goes this way. Our morals dictate our rights. Like we have a constitution in the United States. It was the ideal, the morality of all people are created equal. That was supposed to be the framework that all the rights came from. So usually it goes from our morals to our rights because they are connected. But we can't throw either of them aside and say they don't connect. Or one side is not valid and the other one is. They are connected. And for the rest of our time, I have to go here. Because I think this is where the Bible lines up mostly. That it's more of a morality issue that we need to talk about. And hopefully I said this at the start. I want to be fair about this. I want to talk about it and be accurate. And I just want to think through things with us. I want to think through this. Because what kind of society do we want? We legislate our morality. Our morality dictates our laws and our rights. So, but it always has what type of society do we want? Because it comes down to, and I think rightfully so, we need to see things as it's a baby. And that's where I'm gonna go with this. And I just thought unapologetically I got to go this route. I did a really stupid thing the other year. I got into a Facebook conversation. And if you've ever done one of those before of someone that you don't know, you go, why did I ever do this? But I got into this one. It was a conversation on a friend's page, and I don't know how we got into it, but we were talking about abortion. I said, you know what, I think that I have something to say here. And I just really want a conversation with him. I wanted to hear what he meant when he talked about things. So I asked this question, I want to understand how you get to this. I said, when do you call a baby a life? And he was very scientific about it. And that along with a lot of colorful language, he explained to me that wait a minute, when it's in a woman, it's a fetus. And when it's outside, it's a baby. Well, it's just pretty simple. Come on, well, he used other words. But that's where it came down to. When does a baby become a baby? And I think that's a big question to ask in our society. It's a big question to ask, or what's my rights? But it's also a big question to ask, when does it become a baby? Because where you draw the line, when you draw that, determines what kind of society you want to live in. When you draw the line, determines what type of society do we want. Let me walk through a little bit with you. If you have a 4-day outside of the womb child, it's a baby, right? Hopefully nobody disagrees on that one. It's a baby, right? It would be a crime to do anything harmful to that child. And we all agree with that one, right? Because it's a baby, you can see it. What if it's a 37-week-old baby? You know, for guys, with normal, you go 40 weeks. That's your term. So 37, everything's developed. Even the lungs are mostly developed. This baby is going to be almost the exact same inside or outside of the womb. Everything's there. Is that a baby yet? And you start thinking, maybe? I don't know. Let me go one step further on this one. What about 24 weeks? You know, anywhere in between 21 and 24 weeks, the doctor says, you know, this is a viable baby. We can help this child survive outside of the womb. Everything is there, but it's developing yet. And everything's viable. You can make this work. Is that a baby yet? Let me go one step further on this one. What about 10 weeks? Now, I didn't go to 6 weeks because that's when a heartbeat starts. But at 10 weeks, everything is there. All the organs are present. The nose and the mouth, the eyes are taking shape. And everything's there. It used to be that you had to see this grainy ultrasound. Put that one up. All 4 of my kids, I went to the doctor and I had to ask every time, what am I looking at here? And it was always this picture. It's all grainy. It's like, what am I looking at? Back in 1973, this is all they had. You couldn't even see things. But nowadays, show this something. They have 3D ultrasounds. They can see this all, and you look at that and say, wow, that is 10 weeks. This is a 10-week-old baby. You can say everything's there. Is that a baby? You know, these are just questions and I'm saying that when you draw the line determines what type of society we want to live in. You know, maybe some people go to the route of their potential usefulness or their help for society. It was Iceland. Iceland's very proud of this one fact, that they have eliminated all of Down syndrome in Iceland. Well, they do it this way. They give people a voluntary test, and if the baby has Down syndrome, they abort it. And you get this idea, right? And before we feel smug about ourselves, in America it's 66%. But in Iceland it's almost 100% of someone, if the baby has Down syndrome, they say, nope, I'm getting rid of that. Because it's a burden for our society. The potential for this child is lessened than others. Is it potential? It's their potential usefulness for society? Is that where we draw the line? Because in Hitler's Germany, they just went in all the nursing homes and said, well, you are no longer helpful for our society, and they just got rid of them. It's called euthanasia. They just got rid of them. Is that where we draw the line? Let me go one last one. Last one. I saw this video where a guy was debating another person, and he says, I draw the line at sentience. Well, sentience is a word that means when a baby is able to perceive and respond to sensations like sight and touch and hearing, then they're a baby. And the guy goes, all right, well, help me with this one. If you are in a coma and you are not responding to sight or touch or any other stimuli, is it all right to kill you? And he quickly said, no, I'm not planning on doing this. But he said, of course not, because I'm going to come out of it, probably. All right, and then he goes, well, imagine this, that there's a person in a coma, and then after a certain amount of time, the doctor says they are going to come out of this coma state, let's say 9 months. Is it all right to kill that person? It's when we draw the line determines what type of society we want. And then these are issues. I don't think that we talk about this. Rational people can get to the point of saying, all of these, we should be able to talk about them. We should be able to see this as a birthing process, that this is a life and it will become a life. These are things that we should be able to talk about. It's where we draw the line determines what society we want to live in. Because our God goes at it this way. He says, wait a minute, it's way before you think. Let me read a little bit. Our God says this in Psalm 139. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous, how I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion. As I was woven together in the dark of the womb, you saw me before I was even born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. Our God draws that line way earlier than a lot of us. Because He says, you matter to me. Everything about you matters to me. Don't draw that line too soon to birth. Draw it where I draw it and see as I see it. It's not about our rights. It's about our responsibilities. If this, and each of us, these babies are things that God said, I made this, and I am making this into what I'm going to make this person, then we need to matter. They need to matter to us as well. That's our responsibility. I want to pause right there just to say, I feel like I've sucked a lot of air out of the room. And hopefully you're still with me on this one. You're still tracking, and you see that there's two huge things that we need to come to terms with. Our responsibilities, our rights, and also what our God says. But for the rest of my time, I want to see us go forward as, what is the church? What do we as a church do with seeing two polarized sides? What's our role here? And hopefully you see it as, we need to be the light in this world. People are looking for truth and guidance, and we need to be that. I got three different ideas here. The first one is that we need to engage people with love. Repealing a law or keeping a law will never change a person's mind. I know that there's certain groups of people that are really anxious right now because there's this case that threatens or affirms Roe v. Wade. And everybody's like very anxious about this. But that will never change a person's mind in their heart. We still need to treat them with dignity, whoever they are, whether they agree with us or they don't. We need to treat them with respect and love regardless. And if we can't get to that the basic part, we have just gone off the rails on what the church is. We show respect for people. Children matter to God, however, whether they're in this room, whether they're in a womb somewhere. We still treat them with respect and love and dignity. And hopefully we get that first. Because if the people don't hear that first, they will never hear any of our words. We need to be the light that shows love first. We lead with love. But let me go one part here more. I think we need to work to limit the taking of unborn lives. Now, let me give you one example that just, hopefully we go, duh. It was back in 2003. Congress said, there is a procedure, it's called the partial birth abortion. The baby is coming down the canal here, and they stop the baby as soon as the head comes out. They ram some scissors into the head, and then they suck out all the brain. And you're wondering, no, that wouldn't happen. But that was one of the procedures. That was a possibility. And rational people, moral people, medical experts said, this is just barbaric. It's unnecessary. It's gruesome. This should not be an option. And from the Congress, they said, this is something that should not happen. And they passed a law. It was put into law, and they said, this is not good. This should not be part of our society. And they eliminated it. And the sad part is, even within that, there were some people that said, no, we need to keep that. That's a tough one. That hopefully we can get to the point of saying, this should not be. In Wisconsin, the Children's Code has it that if you're endangering a child in the womb or outside the womb, you should be held accountable. So there was this lady in 2015 that was involuntarily put in an in-treatment program because, and it said this, she habitually lacked self-control and use of alcohol and controlled substances. Wisconsin said, babies matter, outside the womb and inside the womb. Just to state that. In December of last year, there was a drunk driver driving in Arizona, and he drove this car into this other car, and the woman dies. And so did the baby inside of her. And what Arizona said, we're going to charge you with double manslaughter. You killed two people. Those are the things that as a society we decide what type of society we want to live in. Those are things that we need to do. And it's not about keeping the practice of abortion, we've got to jump right there. We need to take care of the need for it. We need to say, wait a minute, this is a person we value. We need to get to the point of that the need for it is no longer there. Let me give you some ideas. The church provides alternatives. There's the stereotype amongst other people that Christians don't care about children outside the womb. It's only those little babies inside the womb, and that's just a crazy argument. Most Christian organizations do the abortion, the alternative to abortion. They say, hey, we'll take care of this baby for you. We'll find a good home. We'll help you get this adopted. Christians do that. Christians go throughout the world and relieve the pain for people that are in tough places. How can we help the children? This is what Christians should do. It was a paradigm shift for me. This was at least 20 years ago for me. Working in youth ministry, we went to London, Ontario, Canada. I love the Canadians. It was so much fun. And we got there and we went to this home for unwed mothers. It was a home for unwed mothers. They didn't have their children yet. See, what happens is the girl was saying, I'm looking for alternatives here. I'm seeing all my choices and there's not a good one in there. At least I don't feel that there is. And the churches in the area said, we are going to set up this home to help this girl. And if she keeps that child, and we will help her through that all through the time. We'll feed her, we'll help her get educated, we'll get her on her feet so she can get a job, however we need to help her. If she gives that child up for adoption, we will help her through that process too. But all the churches gathered around and said, this is important. This is putting our money where our mouth is. We're setting up an alternative for the girl making a bad choice of all the other bad choices. And it changed the way I saw this. I said, this is how the real church interacts in our world. Engages on tough situations like this. It cares for the least of these. That's the church. Will we be able to do that? I know that I only just briefly took off the cover of this can of worms. And I need to wrap up our time here because, we could talk on and on about all the different facets and all the different rights and all the different choices and all the unfairness in our world regarding this. And we could go through it all and we would spend at least another hour sitting here. But I think it's important that we stop and take some time during this week to think about, all right, where do I draw the line? Where do I see people in my world that they've got some unfairness in their life? How can I be the light in my world in this area? Man, I hope you are encouraged to be the light and shine it throughout the world, wherever you are. Because children matter to Jesus and they need to matter to us. Let me pray. If we're not all just our heads spinning, or maybe we're all in our own camp already and you tuned me out for half of it. However it is, let me pray for us that we would remember to be the church this week. So pray with me. Lord Jesus, we know that the lives of children matter to you at all stages of development. God, may they matter to us too. Will you lead us that we might speak up for the least of these, the vulnerable, to converse with those even that disagree, that we might speak of your love for each person. God, would you have mercy on us, that we might see beyond our own world, that we might see into the lives of others, to understand where they are and the tough trials that they have. God, help us this week that we might be your lights. In your name we pray this. Amen.